When my family and I first moved to Minnesota from Thailand, I was only 8 years old. We lived in the project homes in West St. Paul. My mother would always tell me to go home before the sunset because we lived next to an old lady who was going crazy. The entire neighborhood called her insane. I thought that was very mean of the adults. At night, I could hear her singing her grandchild to sleep. I didn't think that was crazy at all. Every time I heard a baby cry, she would sing and the baby would stop crying. I enjoyed listening to her sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Stars and the alphabet song in broken English. Sometimes her singing even lulled me to sleep. My window stares into her bedroom, and sometimes I see her rocking and lulling a wrapped baby in her arms to sleep and feeding the baby with a bottle. She must have been a great grandmother because I rarely hear the baby cry. I didn't see this grandmother outside very often, but sometimes when I'm walking home from school, I would see her standing by her living room window, carrying a baby on her back. One night I couldn't sleep and heard the grandmother having an argument. She was too upset, so I didn't hear the other voice over this grandmother's loud voice. I think her daughter asked her to go babysit the other grandchildren. The grandmother said, "I refuse to go. I have another child to watch." The grandmother was yelling because she didn't want to leave her grandchild that she loved so much. I started to hear the baby cry because of the argument. I looked through my window and saw the grandmother picking up the baby, singing, rocking, and talking to the baby. The baby was giggling, laughing, and fell back to sleep. The next day, I came home and saw a bunch of cop cars outside of her house. I walked inside the house and overheard my mom talking to my aunt about how they finally took her. My mom was telling my aunt about how sad and depressed the grandmother next door had been since everyone died around her and that she outlived her family. She was not able to have any more children and her husband died right after they moved to America. She was completely alone. The grandmother lived alone next door. She would wrap her old Hmong clothes into the shape of a baby and pretend to cry like a baby, talk like a baby, and even laugh and giggle like a baby. The grandmother will even sing and rock the bundle of clothes in her arms back and forth, pretending to feed the baby and then put the baby to bed. My mom went on talking about how the grandmother also likes to carry the bundle of Hmong clothes on her back like a baby and have conversations with the bundle of clothes. According to my mom, last night, the grandmother had an argument with her dead family members because the grandmother didn't want to die yet. She still wanted to be with the bundle of Hmong clothes that she calls her baby. The grandmother cried so loud about how she didn't want to die that my mom could hear her, but her dead family forced her to wear Hmong clothes and she drowned herself in the bathtub. The police knocked on our door and asked if my dad had called 911 because they received a call from our house. My dad said no. The police asked my dad if he knew why she was holding onto a bundle of Hmong clothes and why she was wearing Hmong clothes and drowned herself. That night, I was scared to sleep. I asked my sister to sleep with me. After she fell asleep, I started to hear a baby cry, then heard the usual lullaby song, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. After that, I heard a baby laugh and giggle. Dang, that's just a sad story, man. If you have grandparents, love them while they're still alive. In 2007 in St. Paul, Minnesota, my aunt and uncle had moved into a new place, and I had decided to take my 3-year-old daughter with me to pay them a visit. When we got there, we started to take a tour of the place on our own. After touring the upper and main level, we continued on to the next door that we had not opened yet. This door led to the basement. As I pulled the door open, a normal rush of air flew past me. In my heart, I instantly knew that there was something down there. Not paying much attention to that feeling, I proceeded down the stairs with my daughter. As we got down to the bottom of the stairs, I looked around and started opening doors in rooms. After looking into all the rooms, I proceeded back up the stairs, only to have my little girl rush in front of me. She climbed up 3 steps to be at my eye level and immediately turned to ask me to pick her up. I quickly stated no, and that she was already grown up enough to walk on her own. She then pleaded, and I gave her the same response. As I was finishing my sentence, she pointed somewhere behind me and said, "Monster." I felt goosebumps all over my entire body as I picked up my daughter and ran upstairs. We left the house not saying anything about the incident to my aunt or uncle. As they drove us back home, I asked my daughter what she saw, and she said that she saw a monster girl. I asked her how did that monster girl look, and my daughter refused to say much about it. To this day, I'm not too sure what she saw, but I love her so much that I hope she didn't have to put up with some ugly, rotten face of a monster. My uncle is a local city bus driver in St. Paul, Minnesota. There has been many stories about the deer or the little Hmong girls walking around Jackson Cemetery. I've heard many myself, but of course wouldn't want to experience seeing any of that. This story was told to my dad and I from my uncle a few years ago. He's a serious person in his mid-40s, so I'm sure he wouldn't just be making up stories. Anyways, here's how it goes. My uncle's bus route for the day was around the Como area and runs through the west side of the city. As for many of the people here in St. Paul may know, the bus station is about 3 to 4 blocks away from Jackson Cemetery off Highway 35E and Pennsylvania Avenue, I think. As his shift came to an end at 9 p.m., he drove onto Jackson Street, heading to the station. When he was passing the cemetery, about to make his turn towards the station, he saw a Hmong girl in her mid-teens, dressed in a white dress, of course, waving her hand for him to stop, and so he stopped by her. The girl had asked him if he could give her a ride to Oakdale by Carmike, the movie theater. He knew it was late and that wasn't his route, but he took her in anyway. Keep in mind, my uncle knew and has heard of stories about the Jackson Cemetery, but has never experienced anything himself. He started getting scared when he realized that she could perhaps be a ghost. Trying to stay calm, he tried not to think so much and continued driving. Right after you pass McKnight Avenue, there's another cemetery there, but he said that the girl asked for him to drop her off at the corner by the cemetery, and so he did. She paid and thanked him for the ride and got off. My uncle already knew that she wasn't human and that she had maybe already passed. As he dropped her off, he quickly drove back around and saw the girl walking into the cemetery until he could no longer see her anymore. He was scared, but he was also happy knowing that he helped her out, and thankfully she didn't do anything to harm him or scare him. He thinks that maybe she needed a ride to the other cemetery to perhaps meet or visit someone too. He kept the story to himself and didn't tell anyone until a few months had passed. Interested in sharing your stories? Submit them to HmongChronicles@gmail.com or in the description below. Here is the next story. Thank you. I was about 7 years old when this supernatural occurrence happened. Many years ago, my family and I lived in a rented house in West St. Paul. I have a big family, so I slept in the same bedroom with my 2 older sisters. One morning, my uncle, who lived in East St. Paul, needed babysitters, so both of my older sisters went to help him. They were really close to my aunt, so after they babysat, they slept over with my aunt that night. That night, my grandma came to visit and she slept over. It was a regular night before bed. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. My grandma missed me a lot, so she slept in the same bed with me. Early in the morning, I was almost half asleep and half awake, but it was still very early because the sun wasn't quite up yet. I had a strange feeling like someone or something was close to me. I tried to play it off and go back to sleep, but it was hard to concentrate, having the feeling that someone or something was close to me. This feeling got stronger and stronger, and I could really feel heat right next to me. The only thought that came to my mind was, no one opened the bedroom door, or how could this be because I didn't hear the door open? I was a little scared because I wasn't sure what it was. Right when I opened my eyes, I saw a girl standing next to me with her head down. She had long black hair that covered her face. She was combing her hair slowly, section by section. I was so scared and instantly closed my eyes shut. I pulled my blanket over my head and was breathing heavily. I was so scared that I couldn't even yell or think straight. I realized, as thoughts were flowing through my head, that she wore a dress that I've seen before. The dress just looked so familiar, like I knew someone who had worn it or owned it. I decided to take another peek just to justify that I wasn't seeing things. The second peek, she was still there, next to me, combing her hair slowly. I closed my eyes again. In these couple of seconds, I was so frightened. I knew that my sisters were not home, so it couldn't have been any of them. I felt my grandma next to me. My mom was upstairs in her bed. I thought, who could this be? After a good 15 minutes, I was getting really warm under the sheets and had a little trouble breathing. I pulled down the sheets and peeked again. This time, she was gone. Again, I didn't hear the door open. The next morning, I woke up and didn't say anything to my family or my grandma. I guess I was trying to figure things out. At around 10 a.m., I saw my uncle drop off my sisters. One of my sisters took a shower. Right when she came out from the bedroom, I noticed that she was wearing that same dress that the girl was wearing. I don't remember why, but my parents and I moved in with my uncle and my new aunt. My new aunt had a son and 2 daughters from her previous marriage, and my uncle had 4 sons and 4 daughters from his previous marriage, but only the 2 youngest sons stayed with him. Oh, talk about a big family. After a while of living there, my aunt had her first baby with my uncle. Anyways, one day, my parents weren't home, and my aunt and uncle decided that they wanted to go to the casino, so the 6 of us kids were home alone with the baby. At this time, he was old enough now to sit, and as you may or may not know, we Hmong kids liked to play house. We were upstairs on the 2nd floor playing house. The thing is that upstairs was a lot more creepier than downstairs was, and they also had an attic. After a while of playing, I noticed the attic door, so I asked if I could see what was in there. One of my cousins opened the door, and it was too dark to see anything. We decided to leave the attic alone and left the door open a little. We went back to playing house. The steps that go upstairs would always squeak whenever anyone walked on it. Soon after, we would hear slow squeaks on the steps as if someone was going up the steps away from us. By this time, we were all quietly listening. And then we would hear slow squeaks as if someone was walking back towards us. If any of the adults were home, we'd hear them come in because they were loud talkers. But for some reason, we just couldn't hear anyone downstairs. As soon as one person started freaking out, another would soon follow, and it wasn't until we were all screaming, racing, pushing and shoving each other just to get down the stairs to get to the living room as soon as possible. We all ran to one couch and scrambled on top of each other. We also turned on the TV and turned up the volume so we wouldn't hear anything that we didn't want to hear. Soon, we realized that we left the baby upstairs, sitting on a big teddy bear. Arguing about who should go get him, we all came to a conclusion that we'd all go together and bring him down with us. We waited in the living room for a while, and when my aunt and uncle were the first to show up, we told them about what we heard. But they just brushed it off and said that we were being ridiculous. We don't know who shut the attic door, but since then, we never touched it again and never experienced anything again. Here is a true story. About a few years ago, my buddy dropped off his girlfriend off at home. He lives on East Side St. Paul by the Phelan area. After dropping her off home by Battle Creek, he walked home. He was taking the state trail at night at around 10:30 p.m. when he saw a girl in white following him. It scared him, but he kept on walking. He turned around and she was gone. My buddy got home but didn't think much of it. However, a few days had passed and he kept on seeing the same girl everywhere he went. At school, at home, everywhere he was, he saw her. The strange thing is that no one else really noticed her, only he did. After a while, he got really sick and finally told his parents. His parents went to see many different shamans to see if they could help, but nothing worked. After nothing worked, their family began to go to church. It was only after this that he stopped getting sick and stopped seeing her, only for a bit. After a few weeks going to church, he then started to see her again. This still scared him because he didn't expect her to show up again. My buddy wasn't getting sick anymore, but he still kept on seeing her from time to time wherever he went. His parents thought that going to church had fixed everything, but that wasn't the case. Not wanting to make it a huge deal, he kept everything to himself. A few months went by and he still kept on seeing her, but she wasn't doing anything to hurt him. He just kind of got used to it and forgot about it. His dad asked him if he still sees her, but he says no. Truth is, he tells me he sees her from time to time, even to this day, but it doesn't bother him anymore. I've never personally experienced this, but I've always heard my parents talk about it here and there. Back in the 1990s, when we first immigrated to the US, our relatives found us a rental home in St. Paul to live in. It had really cheap rent. The house itself was old. The windows were shut tight and there was this unbearable odor. All the furniture from the previous renter was still there. I remember my dad saying that there was even a little pot with an egg still sitting on the stove. My parents often said that there was always a cat who came and sat at the window, staring into the house. At night, they would hear someone walking in the kitchen, touching the pots and pans and turning on the sink water. One night, my dad was woken up by the lights in the bathroom. The bathroom was across from their bedroom. The bathroom door was slightly open and the light was turned on. Someone was in the bathroom. My dad could make out that there was a person sitting on the toilet, and he could see their feet swinging back and forth. My dad was too tired to notice that my mom was sleeping next to him, so he said, "Honey, can you close the bathroom door?" All of a sudden, a hand reached out from the bathroom and closed the door. Not all the way, but a little. The next morning, my dad asked my mom, "Did your stomach hurt last night?" My mom replied, "No, what are you talking about?" He explained the whole story about what happened from last night. He said, "But I heard you. You were in the bathroom. You even giggled when I told you to close the door." My mom looked at my dad and said, "That wasn't me. I was sleeping next to you the whole night." They both looked at each other and quickly grabbed me from the bed and raced outside, across the street to my grandma's house. The following day, we moved out. The next day, my aunt's friend and her were talking. Her friend asked, "Why did you guys let your cousins move into that house? My uncle died in that house. He had a stomach problem and died using the bathroom. They found him a week later." My aunt came home and told everybody about what her friend had told her. Later on, the landlord finally told us that when they found his body, it was already starting to rot. After we moved out and another family moved in, my parents warned them, but they didn't believe. 2 days later, that family moved out. Everyone that had moved in moved out in less than a week.